Guys, we're watching the Alec Baldwin trial. We're lucky to have Christopher Melcher here to break down the opening arguments. Hello, everybody. So happy to be here. We just watched all the opening arguments. Apologies that my system looks a little different than usual, but so glad Christopher's here. How you doing, Chris?
Oh, it's great to be here from Santa Fe.
You are there in New Mexico. He's covering for many outlets, including Court TV and others. We're so happy to have you here as well. Well, you just watched the opening with us. We're playing some footage behind there, but I want to get your thoughts. The opening for me was pretty strong from the prosecution. It dripped of a lot of accountability, but through that prosecution, by the second half, there was a lot of justifying for the evidence being destroyed. And that was frustrating. And then the defense came out and they talked about the magic of movies. It was quite odd. I wasn't as engrossed. And then they showed some clips from Rust, which was kind of off-putting to us in the chat. It looked like they were almost promoting the movie in some weird way. But they played a lot saying this is actor Alec Baldwin and, you know, that he was just doing a role. But then when they got to the part that the prosecution destroyed the evidence, I was much more invested. So how did you take all this? How did both sides do in your opinion?
Well, each side has some good points to make, and in opening, they're really previewing to the jury what their promises of the evidence will show. And when you know that there's some landmines out there, they want to kind of diffuse that by addressing it up front. Now, with the prosecution, it leads off on saying Alec Baldwin playing make-believe with a gun on set. And at first I thought, wow, it's a little demeaning, but I actually liked it because here you see Alec Baldwin, this guy that, you know, is playing a cowboy on set, but he doesn't know how to use a gun like every cowboy should. And so in that very quick statement, exposing him as somebody who's playing, and I really like that. Because he's saying like, oh, I'm just some actor. I'm not supposed to do any safety check. Oh, this is a movie. The rules of safety don't apply. And that is utter nonsense. This is a real firearm that he took possession of on the word of somebody else that it was unloaded, pointed it at two people, and I would say certainly pulled the trigger and shot them.
Yeah.
And for him to say, oh, well, I just took somebody else's word for it, that is ludicrous. And that came out yesterday in jury selection. You know, I'm spending time in this little town here. People have guns. People grew up with guns. And that came out in jury selection. Two people saying, you always check your weapon. You never take anybody's word for it. And so if we have folks like that on the jury that think that way, he's going to get convicted. If we have people saying, oh, I don't know anything guns, I'm scared of guns, so I never touched guns or learned about guns, then they're going to believe like, hey, he's handed this, he's said it's safe. Well, of course, he should just take somebody's word that it's safe.
That's what it really comes down to, right? There's not one shred of evidence Alec knew there was a live round in that gun, was a quote from the defense. And it's a strong one. There was another one at the end because you and I have been hard on Alec. Now we're judging it based on the lawyers. There was another one at the end. He just got there. He didn't know all the backstory about the safety issues and the crew leaving. No actor in history has ever caught a live round in a prop gun on a safety check beforehand. Now I don't know if that's true, right? I don't know if that's actually accurate, but it is good language, right? They are doing the right things here to sort of skirt the blame. I guess legally it sounds like you're impressed so far in what they're narrating, but you still believe he holds more accountability than he's claiming.
Yeah, I didn't really care for Luke's opening. And I think he has to be very careful with that last statement. Alec just showed up. He's just some actor. Because they drew a win, as we know, on Monday, that the judge excluded that he was also acting as a producer who has, the ultimate duty of care for safety on that set, and excluded the video of him bossing people around on that very set, also involving firearms. And I'm hoping the prosecution calls him out and saying, you guys just open the door on that. Because that was the concern that I had when that evidence was excluded. Alec now is not the producer. They'll never hear that. And he just says, hey, I'm just some dumb actor. I just show up and do what I'm told. That's not what happened.
Yep.
So he may have opened the door on that one.
Oh, I love that because I'm hearing him like, oh, shit, we're screwed. But no, you're right, because that That's what needs to happen, right? Now the prosecution can make the argument, well, you're playing like he had no say, but that's not true. Here's him doing this here. Even in the clip they played from Rust, they're like, he's an actor, method acting. He's just looking. He's taking direction. He's knowing how to do it all. He's doing far more than just sit there and listen. That's got to play into. So is this a way for that to go? Do you think that's what part of those sidebars were potentially as well? How does the prosecution get to move forward and use that?
So they'll, if they're thinking the same thing that I am, then they'll bring that up. The judge might, give an instruction and saying, hey, jury, you're supposed to disregard that. But I mean, it's a very fine line that the defense has to play, because if they open that up, that's it for them.
Yeah, well, they're watching. They're watching you, Chris, all the time, just like in depth. They're going to be watching this. They're going to take that note, and I hope they do, because this is the most frustrating part as I was watching it. And Kim, I want to get your thoughts too, because they keep trying to play it like he's the dumb actor. And I'm like, well, okay, they eliminated the producer, which I already was frustrated by, but if they can bring that back in to show that he did have more say. We were talking about it with Kim earlier, the fact that producers are involved in the budget, right? How to make their days. Does he have money invested? Does he get residuals? All of those things help to counter, the fact that, yeah, he has monetary incentive. Therefore, as a producer, he can make those calls, right? It's kind of impossible for him to try to play like his producer had nothing to do with this. Do you disagree?
Is that specifically to me?
Oh, sorry. I was asking, I meant to go to you, Kim, but Chris, do you disagree with that?
No, I mean, that's where it comes down to is, and again, but the judge made that ruling. That evidence isn't coming in unless they open the door to it.
Kim, you've been watching this closely, and through the Halyna Gutierrez trial, like obviously his producing has something to do with this, right? There was a lot of not safe things going on that set, correct?
Yes, absolutely. There definitely were a number of situations that would be considered unsafe on this set. And yes, I do agree with the defense in some ways that Dave Halls has some responsibility in this, as being in charge of safety and being the AD. However, one thing I will say I find very interesting about all of this is that Hannah's case, it was not isolated that she was just the armorer. It was considered that she was working in props, and that was a part of her case, that she had basically too much workload because she was doing two roles. And that wasn't too confusing for the jury. But when we look at Alec, we can't talk about that he was a producer. He also was involved in the story of the film as well as being the lead actor, but that's too much. So I'm wondering now, based on what has been said in this opening statement, if that aspect of him being a producer is going to be able to remain out of this case, because I feel like it's too intertwined.
Yeah, and this judge runs a tight ship. You could see jury selection in 1 day, case in 10 days. So I don't think her going to be motivated to expand the case, but she might have to. Now, what we heard in the defense is a couple of things that you kind of quickly picked up on comments. Blame the police for a bad investigation.
Yep.
They're also looking at two other people who may have manipulated the evidence. The prop master. Okay, Halyna Gutierrez-Reed, who's the armorer, the prop master, she had the prop truck. That's where the gun was locked. That's where the extra ammo was kept. They didn't search that, and they checked her later. So there's an implication, and she said she threw stuff away. So the implication, she was trying to cover herself. More significantly, the supplier of the dummy rounds, that person wasn't contacted for quite a while, and there was a concern or theory like, well, maybe he mistakenly introduced a live round in a box of dummy rounds and delivered it to the prop master. But that person wasn't contacted in search for almost a month, and he was involved in helping with the investigation. So it's like, here is a potential defendant steering the investigation. So they're picking up on that. I think that's significant. Also, Dave Halls is not on the prosecution witness list. And it appears that they're not going to call him. And the defense is going to call him. Why would they do that? Well, Dave Halls, first of all, got a sweetheart deal, probation, that was offered to Alec, and he didn't pick it up. So, he got a sweetheart deal, even though he had a tremendous amount of liability here. Secondly, there's a conflict in the testimony. Dave Halls at the Halyna trial said, I didn't hand it to him and say cold gun. Halyna did that. And so there's now like, okay, who handed this gun to him? Alec had conflicting statements to the police about that. So, they're not bringing him in, which is, I think, going to be weird. The other thing, Joel Souza.
Yeah.
Okay, so he
director.
got shot. Is he going to, here's my concern. Joel Souza takes a stand and he says, I forgive Alec. It was a mistake. That's going to be, would he do that? Well, he's still in the industry, number one. Number two, he settled his civil case. And number three, continued working on Rust with Alec. That, if Alec can pull that one off, I got to think, hey, the guy that got shot is saying, hey, I forgive you. And again, I'm not trying to help the defense here, but if they could pull that off, I got to think that's going to sway the jury.
That is very true. If Joel, and it's true, there's a little bit, again, why the producer role of Alec is so much more important. He's more than just an actor. Alec Baldwin is a superstar who has more say on over anybody on that set. If Alec Baldwin doesn't want to do something or wants to change something as they're going, he can make that call, right? So that's why it's really frustrating that Judge Summer just sort of disregarded that and said, I don't understand why the two things are relevant. They are. It doesn't make any sense to me. I want to get your last on this because the prosecution did say he aimed that gun in reckless disregard to Halyna Hutchins. At the end of the day, we can argue all day as to who put the live round in. That's clearly going to be Alec's argument, but they have a point there. Doesn't matter that it's in there. It doesn't matter if they don't always check. And as the defense tried to say, oh, no actor's ever caught one. They may have, right? Isn't that part of the safety protocol on these sets? Does he not bear any responsibility? Should he have not aimed that weapon without checking with his own eyes? Do you think that's where it's going to come down?
Absolutely. So, in the history of filmmaking, and we're talking 100 years, there's only two people who have been shot on a movie, Brandon Lee and Halyna Hutchins, and Joel Souza, in these two separate incidents. And they're going to pump that up. This has only happened twice. This is not an act of God. This is an act of utter stupidity, meaning that in the thousands of movies that have been made in the last 100 years, there's only two people that have been so stupid to have introduced something that could shoot somebody on a movie set. So to me, that doesn't prove their point. It proves this is a gross deviation from the standard of care. And that safety bulletin that Luke was talking about, it says right there, that gun has to be checked every time. The actor's not expected to know how to check the gun, but the actor will be shown the gun physically and visually every single time. This is unloaded. You see this is unloaded, Alec? Yes. Here, these are dummy rounds. I'm shaking them by your ear. You can hear this. BB, yes, I do. I'm loading them in there. How long did that take? 10 seconds.
Yeah.
That is supposed to happen. Alec would have happen every time. He says, oh, in my training. Well, if you had any training, you would have that done. The other thing he says, oh, I would have never pulled the trigger. I would have never pulled the trigger, implying that there would have been some better checking on his behalf had the scene called for pulling the trigger, which is ridiculous. You do not take possession of a firearm without checking that it's unloaded or having somebody check it for you. That is the first rule of gun safety. Treat every gun as loaded until it's verified that it's unloaded. I have known people, worked on cases from people killed with supposedly unloaded guns. This is just utter stupidity on Alec's part. The fact that he's an actor on a movie set does not mean that the rules of safety don't apply. And again, I also see his argument. Like, let's say there was going to be an explosion. Is he supposed to go through and understand like how the pyrotechnics work? I mean, at some level, he has to rely on the pros. But here, that supposed pro, Hannah was not even in the room. And first AD, when you look at that safety bulletin, he had no business touching the gun. The only people who can touch the gun is the prop master or the armorer. First AD should have never touched it. Now, so again, we're talking 10 seconds to check this gun. 10 seconds for a life. And he was pointing it at these people.
Yep.
So again, I find him responsible, but I also see his defense. And again, it's going to come down to who's on that jury and how do they process this information.
Well, and there's a lot of tricky going on because there was a point where he said they were trying to say like, what was the line here? As it's not like the guidelines on movie sets. They're trying to treat it like it's the Navy SEALs or NASA. And I'm sitting there like, well, yeah, if there's firearms, they should. Any profession that has dangerous things like that, has protocols, and that's why this doesn't happen, right? So this idea that he's trying to downplay and play like, oh, he's just an actor, and they don't have these types of things, and they're just trying to distract you. Blah 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 blah. They're after Alec. This is what it's about. They don't. They just wanted to get Alec. Do you think? I mean, they're trying to level up him as this movie star that the jury's going to feel for. Could that backfire?
I love that you're bringing up that point, and Luke in that statement is completely out of touch, because that would play in Hollywood where it's all the land of make believe and all this stuff and all this magic of movie making, and sure, but not in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I'm telling you, this is a one horse town. People have guns here, and they're probably not really thinking so highly of, you know, Hollywood actors. And it's like this is a Western town, and so for somebody to come into this town and play cowboy, and say, well,
fake cowboy,
even though it's a real gun, and I'm going to point it at people, but because I'm an actor, I get to do this. You see? No, I really think that's the turnoff. And again, the guy's out of touch with this audience. And like I say, I think his better case would be like, hey, I mean, there were professionals. We hired professionals. I relied on them and didn't know simple, rather than trying to gild the lily and to kind of demean these safety rules. These rules are here because people do get killed if they're not followed.
Yeah, exactly. So we got a lot more. We're grateful for Chris. We had a little bit of an in and out because of the New Mexico and feeds here, but we're so grateful to have him there in the courtroom. I hope we get to see you. You got to get in there, sneak in at one point and flash us a little peace sign from the courtroom. Kim and I are here. Kim, anything else you want to add before I wrap it? Anything you want to ask him?
I think it's definitely showing that this is going to be a very interesting trial. I think people who were concerned that it was going to be, boring. I don't think that this is boring. I think this is a very serious situation. There's a lot of things that need to be looked at with the film industry, as well as just the complications of this case. I think if I had one question for Christopher, it would be, how do you see this playing out?
I mean, I think the odds are for acquittal, because there are problems with the prosecution's case, the investigation, the fact that he, was an actor, the fact that who would possibly think that there's a live round on that set? How could you think somebody would be so reckless? So, I gotta think it's his case to win, that he should be acquitted. However, you can see with these opening, both sides, you have a strong case until you start talking. And that's what we've taught as lawyers. If you think you're winning, shut up and sit down, because you don't want to lose your own case. So if he takes the stand, I mean, he could seal his victory, but he could also doom it to defeat.
Oh, that is true. That's what I'm hoping. I like, he shouldn't, but I'm like, please do it, because it's going to be far more interesting to watch. But we got a lot more. We're waiting for this to come back. We'll be streaming this trial all week for the next 8 days. It's a rarity to see Kim and I this much. So come, and Chris will be popping in when he can from there. So make sure you're hitting that subscribe if you're watching live now, or if you're watching this on the replay. We'll be watching in the morning, and then we'll be following right up with a stream in the afternoon, each time giving you a recap of what we've seen as the most important part. So even if you miss a portion, you can always come back and catch the replays. Appreciate you guys who are all here watching live.